The grand, historic corridors of the British monarchy have always been shrouded in a meticulous blend of absolute silence and carefully curated whispers, where every single public appearance is measured to the millimetre, and every sudden departure from the norm sends shockwaves through the global media landscape. For centuries, the royal family has operated on a foundational principle of dignified distance, an unwritten code suggesting that true authority is preserved not by constant explanation, but by a certain untouchable mystique that keeps the public captivated yet firmly at arm's length. Yet, in our contemporary era, this ancient tapestry of tradition has increasingly clashed with the relentless, unyielding demands of the 24-hour digital news cycle, creating a volatile arena where private movements are transformed into monumental public events almost instantaneously. Observers of these institutions have grown accustomed to a highly choreographed dance, a sequence of announcements and subsequent retractions that seem less like standard administrative scheduling and far more like a deliberate, expertly manufactured melodrama designed to dominate headlines across multiple continents simultaneously. As the world watches, the tension between traditional duty and the modern commodification of public identity has reached a fascinating crescendo, creating an atmosphere charged with anticipation, where every single gesture, brief leak, or sudden travel adjustment is scrutinized for hidden motives and deeper underlying strategies. This ongoing spectacle operates on a level of profound psychological intrigue, pulling audiences into an intricate narrative web where the boundaries between authentic personal crisis and calculated public relations maneuvers become almost completely indistinguishable to the untrained eye. If you find these deep insights into the hidden mechanics of global fame and legacy institutions compelling, please take a brief moment to support our channel by subscribing, hitting the notification bell, and liking this video so you never miss our daily deep dives into the complex stories shaping our world today. The current atmosphere surrounding these public figures is thick with a palpable sense of strategic positioning, a feeling that every single development is part of a much larger, highly sophisticated game of chess where public perception is the ultimate prize to be won at all costs. For several days, the media has been flooded with a dizzying array of contradictory reports regarding imminent international travel plans, creating a frantic cycle of anticipation that seems completely detached from the actual logistical reality of the situation itself. One day, the public is told that a monumental trip across the Atlantic is absolutely out of the question due to severe, insurmountable logistical complications and profound anxieties regarding personal safety in a foreign territory. The very next day, the narrative shifts entirely, suggesting that emotional reconciliation is the paramount priority, only for the subsequent morning to bring yet another wave of ambiguous denials and carefully worded statements from official spokespeople that leave the public even more deeply confused than they were initially. This persistent, exhausting pattern of briefing and counter-briefing does not happen by accident. It is the hallmark of a contemporary celebrity apparatus that understands that the only thing worse than negative press is absolutely no press at all, relying on a continuous loop of speculation to keep audiences permanently hooked. This specific strategy of creating a prolonged, artificial news cycle out of standard domestic arrangements highlights a profound reliance on constant media visibility, revealing a broader operational philosophy that views public attention not as a byproduct of meaningful endeavor, but as the primary currency required to maintain global relevance and commercial viability. To fully understand the current state of affairs, one must appreciate the sheer historical irony embedded within these highly telegraphed journeys, which frequently mirror the great, theatrical maneuvers of the past where figures of immense ambition set out on public campaigns with their ultimate destinations already entirely predetermined by necessity. There is a distinct sense of inevitability to these current developments, an underlying reality suggesting that despite all the public hand-wringing and dramatic declarations of hesitation, the path being taken was always the only viable option available to maintain a fading spotlight. The complex machinery operating behind the scenes is driven by an acute awareness that certain public figures simply cannot afford to detach themselves from the foundational source of their global identity, regardless of how much they might publicly protest against the very institution that granted them their initial prominence. When we strip away the superficial layers of manufactured outrage, the tearful briefings and the elaborate claims of existential danger, we are left with a very clear, highly pragmatic calculations concerning long-term brand preservation and the desperate need to maintain a tangible connection to an ancient heritage. The grand illusion of choice is frequently maintained to give the impression of autonomy. But seasoned observers recognize that the underlying economic and social imperatives leave very little room for genuine deviation from the established royal orbit as the week progresses and the logistical details of this highly anticipated arrival begin to solidify in the public domain. The sheer contrast between the dramatic rhetoric of the past several months and the current reality becomes increasingly impossible to ignore. The elaborate explanations regarding the absolute impossibility of navigating certain territories without specialized state-funded protection seem to have dissolved overnight, replaced by a sudden, highly opportunistic willingness to embrace the exact environment that was previously decried as entirely hostile. This rapid shift in perspective underscores a fundamental truth about the nature of contemporary public relations, where principles are frequently adjusted to align with the shifting demands of commercial survival and the critical necessity of securing high-profile visual associations. The upcoming days promise to deliver a fascinating study in public behavior as the reality of these personal interactions begins to unfold against a backdrop of deep institutional skepticism and a public that is becoming increasingly weary of perpetual theatricality. The stage is thoroughly set for a monumental confrontation between the enduring dignity of a historic legacy and the aggressive, self-serving demands of modern celebrity culture, ensuring that the unfolding narrative will remain a subject of intense global fascination for the foreseeable future. The unfolding drama deepens significantly as we pivot from the carefully engineered logistical spectacles of international travel to the explosive, raw reality of a legal and personal reckoning that has shattered any lingering illusions of media invulnerability. At the absolute center of this storm is a stunning, comprehensive collapse of a high-profile legal campaign that was intended to punish the legacy press, but has instead resulted in a devastating, self-inflicted wound to a global reputation. To understand the gravity of this moment, one must look at the sheer scale of the defeat in the High Court, where a sweeping multi-claim lawsuit was systematically dismantled, leaving the principal instigator entirely exposed to the harsh glare of public failure. It is a rare and deeply damaging occurrence for a prominent public figure to have their legal arguments rejected so thoroughly, but what makes this specific defeat truly catastrophic is the simultaneous unraveling of a carefully constructed narrative of victimhood and absolute honesty. For years, the global audience has been told a story of a pure, principled crusade against the intrusive mechanisms of the media, an ongoing narrative asserting that certain individuals were entirely above the murky world of press manipulation and strategic briefing. That entire defensive framework has now completely disintegrated under the weight of definitive legal disclosures. revealing a frantic behind-the-scenes operation that was engaging in the exact same duplicitous behaviors it publicly condemned with such fierce moral righteousness. The true architecture of this reputational disaster began to take shape when a prominent female journalist, having been dragged into the brutal arena of a high-stakes court proceeding, decided that she would no longer remain silent while her professional integrity was systematically assassinated by expensive corporate lawyers. In a move that sent immediate shockwaves through the highest echelons of both society and the media industry, she produced ancient communications from over a decade ago that shed a piercing light on the true character and behavior of a prince during his formative adult years. These long-hidden messages painted a vivid, deeply unsettling portrait of immense social arrogance, a world where extreme privilege manifested as a complete disregard for standard boundaries and a casual, almost boorish treatment of those around him. The specific details emerging from these disclosures are nothing short of astonishing, describing initial personal interactions that felt remarkably similar to the outdated entitled patterns of behavior historically associated with older disgraced members of the family tree. The public was suddenly forced to confront a reality where a young prince, upon meeting a member of the press for the very first time in a private social setting, thought it entirely appropriate to engage in bizarre, controlling power plays under the guise of establishing trust. This revelation completely upends the carefully marketed image of a vulnerable, deeply sensitive modern humanitarian, replacing it with the far more recognizable figure of an entitled, reckless young man relying on his untouchable status to dictate terms to everyone in his immediate orbit, as the specific legal documents and personal testimonies filtered out into the wider public domain. The sheer hypocrisy of the entire royal diaspora became impossible to defend, particularly regarding the systematic manipulation of major news outlets. It has now been established as a matter of public record that while official representatives were issuing fierce, on-the-record denials to legacy newspapers regarding specific private meetings and alliances, those very same offices were secretly tipping off selected journalists behind closed doors to shape the narrative to their advantage. This systematic breach of the unwritten journalistic code represents a profound betrayal of professional trust, demonstrating that the entire operation was perfectly willing to sacrifice the credibility of its own staff and the accuracy of major publications to maintain a superficial facade of control. No media professional willingly enters an environment where they are forced to disseminate outright falsehoods to competing publications. And the revelations emerging from this trial make it perfectly clear that this culture of deception was being directed entirely from the very top of the organization. The psychological fallout from this exposure has been immediate and severe, causing an unprecedented rift between the couple as the commercial entity realizes that its primary asset, a pristine public reputation, has been thoroughly and permanently compromised by these toxic disclosures. This sudden collapse of media credibility explains why there is now such a desperate, frantic effort to distance the broader commercial brand from a husband whose standing has been completely set on fire by his own profound arrogance and legal ineptitude. Any competent branding expert or global public relations strategist would look at the current landscape and offer the exact same blunt advice, which is to avoid being photographed anywhere near an individual who has just suffered such an extraordinary, self-inflicted blow to their international prestige. For years, the public has been accustomed to seeing this particular couple completely joined at the hip, presenting a unified, highly stylized front to the world through a series of carefully synchronized appearances and intense, performative displays of mutual devotion. Yet, the harsh realities of the commercial marketplace have a way of dissolving even the most fiercely defended illusions, and the sudden absence of a supportive partner from key public events speaks volumes about the severe internal panic currently gripping their entire commercial operation. The reality is that the entire business model depends entirely on maintaining a certain regal halo, a sense of proximity to an ancient, revered crown that elevates standard commercial products above the mundane realities of the ordinary marketplace. When that halo is replaced by the toxic smoke of a highly publicized legal disaster and allegations of deeply creepy, manipulative personal behavior, the entire financial structure begins to look incredibly fragile, threatening to collapse under the weight of its own internal contradictions. The absolute devastation of this week cannot be overstated, as each passing day brought a new, highly visible humiliation that was broadcast in real time to a global audience hungry for every single detail of the unfolding catastrophe. On one day, a highly anticipated accommodation arrangement at an official royal residence was abruptly and publicly rescinded, an embarrassing eviction that played out across social media platforms for the entire world to see. The very next day brought the total, unconditional slaughter of the privacy lawsuit, with dozens of claims being dismissed with prejudice, leaving the legal team with absolutely nothing to show for millions of dollars in expenditures other than a massive, permanent stain on their client's public record. This relentless cascade of failures has created a palpable sense of tension and desperation, a feeling that the ground is rapidly shifting beneath the feet of those who once believed they could dictate terms to both the British monarchy and the global media with complete impunity. The atmosphere is now thick with the unmistakable scent of a permanent reputational shift, an awareness that the old strategies of aggressive litigation and loud, moralizing public statements will no longer suffice to protect a brand that has been so thoroughly exposed as hypocritical, erratic, and deeply detached from reality. The final chapter of this profound institutional saga shifts away from the immediate carnage of the courtroom and toward a much larger, deeply calculated plan aimed at long-term commercial survival and final personal vindication. To truly comprehend the high-stakes game currently playing out across the historic estates of the United Kingdom, one must look closely at the upcoming commemorative dates that hold immense emotional sway over the global public consciousness. It is now completely evident that a planned journey to the ancestral resting place of a deceased iconic princess is not merely a private moment of family reflection, but rather the foundational cornerstone of a massive multi-million-dollar international broadcasting project. For over a year, sophisticated production teams have been quietly laying the groundwork for a sweeping biographical documentary, a media venture that relies entirely on exploiting raw personal history and deep public nostalgia to secure a lucrative financial future. By orchestrating a highly publicized visit involving the young grandchildren who never knew their late grandmother, the entire operation is attempting to construct a powerful visual narrative that can be sold directly to global streaming giants hungry for exclusive access to the inner sanctum of the royal heritage. This strategy reveals a profound, almost cynical reliance on the enduring legacy of the past to prop up a contemporary commercial brand that has lost its authentic connection to the living British crown. This aggressive commercialization of historical grief stands in sharp contrast to the delicate ongoing health crises and massive administrative burdens currently facing the reigning monarch, who finds himself caught in an incredibly agonizing personal and institutional dilemma. Close advisors within the palace walls have grown increasingly alarmed by the persistent rumors of private audiences and clandestine meetings being arranged behind the scenes, viewing them as a dangerous capitulation to emotional pressure at a time when institutional stability is paramount. The historic British monarchy has endured for over a millennium precisely because its leaders have consistently prioritized the sacred dignity of the crown over the volatile, fleeting demands of personal sentimentality and modern family dynamics. To grant a formal audience to individuals who have spent the better part of a decade systematically trashing the royal family, levelling wild accusations against high court judges, and broadcasting private family grievances to the highest international bidder is seen by many as an extraordinary, unprecedented error in judgment. The price of preserving a revered institution frequently requires immense personal sacrifice, including the heartbreaking decision to sever direct ties with distant family members who have proven themselves to be fundamentally untrustworthy, volatile, and deeply hostile to the long-term survival of the sovereign estate. The intricate biography of these key players reveals a long history of unchecked entitlement and increasingly desperate attempts to rebuild a public image that was thoroughly shattered by their own voluntary exile. When the prince originally chose to abandon his traditional duties in pursuit of independent global fame, he fundamentally underestimated the reality that his entire commercial value was completely dependent on the very regal halo he so loudly rejected. Without the official titles, the historic uniforms, and the protective embrace of the state apparatus, the transition into the highly competitive arena of international celebrity culture has been characterized by a sequence of financial failures, cancelled partnerships, and profound public indifference. This harsh reality has forced a rapid, desperate shift in strategy, driving a frantic campaign to secure any form of official royal adjacency that can be embossed onto commercial lifestyle brands and media ventures to simulate authentic institutional backing. The ongoing tragedy of this dynamic is that it reduces an ancient, dignified family legacy into a mere marketing tool, an opportunistic exercise in brand alignment designed to keep a failing commercial enterprise afloat in an increasingly skeptical global marketplace as the week draws to a close. The true long-term consequences of this immense reputational collapse are beginning to solidify, altering the landscape of public opinion in ways that cannot be easily repaired by expensive public relations campaigns or manufactured media events. While the dedicated followers of the royal narrative remain thoroughly obsessed with every single legal briefing and personal betrayal, the wider global public is beginning to experience a profound sense of exhaustion with the perpetual theatricalities surrounding this exiled couple. The devastating exposure of a systematic culture of deception within their private office has completely demolished the central premise of their entire public identity, proving that their complaints regarding media manipulation were entirely hypocritical. For the prince, the ultimate purpose of this elaborate, lifelong campaign has always been the complete freedom to navigate the United Kingdom entirely on his own terms, utilizing state-funded resources while remaining completely free from the traditional obligations of public duty and institutional loyalty. Yet, that ultimate ambition remains entirely dependent on the blessing and financial cooperation of a father who must now choose between the protective instincts of a parent and the solemn, unyielding responsibilities of a reigning monarch who answers directly to history. The unfolding events of the coming months will undoubtedly serve as a defining moment for the modern monarchy, testing the boundaries of institutional resilience against the relentless, invasive pressures of the contemporary celebrity ecosystem. The spectacular downfall of the prince's legal credibility, combined with the public exposure of his boorish and entitled